14 states in 14 days. We're doing it by motorcycle. It's called biking the Battleground. Tired of all the political bickering, tired of the animosity between legislators, tired of being a U.S. citizen, a U.S. taxpaying citizen, and always feeling like your priorities in state legislatures are second fiddle to the political parties. Well, Nebraska has an interesting solution. Want to hear what it is? This is Kate Heltzel, the director of the Unicameral Information Office at the state capitol in Nebraska. Fascinated by what I was reading on the website for Nebraska's state legislature about the unicameral system. What is that?
Well, in its simplest terms, it just means that we have one house instead of two. And so every other state and Congress is organized on a bicameral system where you have a House of Representatives and a Senate. And so we just have one.
So what's the history behind that?
Well, we had a two-house system from statehood in 1867 until we had a constitutional amendment to implement a one-house system, and that was adopted in 1934. So we had our experiment with the two-house system, but the movement for unicameralism started a bit before 1934. We had about a dozen proposals to change to a one-house system, and it sort of grew out of the National Progressive Movement, which was a strong force among Nebraska farmers, and they wanted a more responsive and a more locally focused government. And so they thought one way to do that would be to have a one-house system, so it would be smaller and more responsive to Nebraskans. And so they did it through initiative petition, and it passed with about 60% of the votes, and we've been a one-house system ever since.
So has it worked that way? Is it more responsive to Nebraskans?
I think it is. It's a little hard to separate out the aspects of it. The one-house system, we have a one-house system, but we're also officially nonpartisan, and that was part of the original constitutional amendment, was that that folks be elected to the legislature on nonpartisan ballots. And so I think when you take those two elements together, that we are much more responsive to constituents, because on the one hand, part of the goal of the one-house system and the nonpartisan system was to make it so that legislators cared more about issues that directly impacted their constituents than they did about what the party line was. And I think that's still true.
Well, it's funny because how you describe that, founding fathers actually did not want political parties. They wanted people just to run, such as a system you describe in Nebraska. So they would be responsive to the people. Mm-hmm. So if you're someone in Nebraska who wants to run for a state political office, you don't have to worry about running as a Democrat or as a Republican?
That's true of the legislature. Other statewide offices are different, but for the legislature, a party affiliation is not included on the ballot. And so the primary is just a top two primary, and whoever the top two vote getters are move on regardless of party.
And how does that work? How does that work with the governor when it comes time to pass bills and get the final signature? I know the governor right now in Nebraska is Republican. How does that work? Does it go smoothly?
For the most part, I'm trying to think. The governor vetoed a few bills this last session, but it's not a regular occurrence by any means.
Well, on a day-to-day basis, certainly it has to be, even though people in the legislature don't have political party affiliation, there has to be some sort of groupings that form anyhow, because people of like mind try and do work with people of like mind, right?
It's true. We don't have official party caucuses or whips or any of that sort of thing. So there's no official party structure. Of course, folks do usually know each other's party affiliation and tend to vote with like-minded folks. But the sort of general way that people think of it is that you're sort of a free agent for the most part, in that if you bring a bill, you need to, make sure that you have votes, and you have to remake those coalitions on every bill, because you can't count on someone's vote just because they're the same party as you.
Right. So how many legislators are there right now in Nebraska?
There are 49.
49. And what have you noticed? I don't know how long you've been in your position, but what have you noticed in terms of voting? Is it usually 50-50 split, or does it vary through the years?
You know, it's usually the case that by the time something gets to the final round of voting, it's already gone through, the committee process and 2 previous rounds of debate. And so it's often the case that you'll get legislation that passes, 30 to nothing, 40 to nothing, 49 to nothing. Usually by the time they get to that stage, they've hammered out the details.
And then when it passes, it goes right to the governor's desk for either signing or not signing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
Okay. So things move faster too.
Yes, that was one of the goals with the system, was if you made it streamlined, that it would be more efficient.
Now, I find this fascinating because at this day and age, can the rest of the nation learn anything from Nebraska's system? And if so, what?
That's a good question. I'm not sure that it would, that the kind of system that we have would work in other places, partly because, ours came about through the initiative petition process, so it's unlikely that sitting officials would want to vote themselves out of office.
Right.
And not all states have the initiative process, so not sure how likely it would be to happen other places. But I do think that it encourages members to focus on policy issues more than party interests, and I think that would be a good thing for everyone.
Do you think Nebraskan legislators get along better than those in the rest of the nation?
That's tough. It's hard to tell. I mean, I think they pride themselves on being collegial and being able to reach out to folks who may not have their same background, because there literally aren't 2 sides to the aisle, since we don't organize ourselves that way. There's not an aisle to reach across. So I think they would say so.
Well, it may not work everywhere, but it sure is nice to know it works somewhere. Putting politics aside, putting parties aside for the citizens. What a concept. How very American. Next stop, Kansas. It's called Biking the Battleground, and I can't wait to meet you on the road.